Hi, and welcome to another episode of This Week in Triathlon. This week, we've got a pretty interesting show with Ironman Florida last weekend. There's a lot to talk about. As always, I'm joined by my co-host and co-creator, Kevin Taddonio, who actually was at that race and kind of sort of in the middle of the controversy. So without further ado, let me get Kevin on here. How you doing, Kevin?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, and you're coming to us live from Chicago. You're away on business, regular business, not triathlon business. But as I was saying, there's quite a bit to talk about in the world of triathlon, especially as it relates to Ironman Florida. So should we get started?
Yeah, obviously Ironman Florida, as our viewers probably know, was last Saturday. Awesome races on the men's side, awesome races on the women's side. This is usually a really fast course. Didn't disappoint, that's for sure, even though it was a hot day. The Prince of Bahrain was racing, so there was some buzz about that kind of going into the race. We saw an amazing Ironman debut. I believe it was debut by Victor del Corral of Spain. Amazing race by him. Had the fastest run that I'm basically aware of in the United States in an Ironman, ran at 2:37 to win the race. But obviously, there were some other events going on that kind of, unfortunately, took away from his performance. And from the people that have been contributing on Slow Twitch, myself included, obviously that comes down to the infraction of Rule 5.9 of the USAT code, which is the CPSC helmet certification. So I think we should just jump in straight with that. What do you think?
No, I definitely agree, and like you said, it overshadowed what was an incredible day both by him and Andrew Starkowicz. But as I mentioned a little bit earlier, you were kind of in the middle of it. So do you want to tell us about sort of how the day progressed, at least from your point of view? Because I think it's important to say that whatever you're going to tell us is what happened in your day and how it was connected to the outcome. But why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. And so basically, showed up. I had a pretty late start to Ironman Tahoe, where I made it to the start line about 90 seconds before the race. So I kind of overcompensated, if you will, at Ironman Florida. I showed up about 2 hours before the race started, just to make sure I had plenty of time, to make sure I wasn't stressing it at all. And so I'm setting up my bike, and the pros. A lot of the pros came to bring their bikes and helmets and things like that on race day because there was some bad weather coming in. So I think they kind of gave some dispensation to that kind of mandate. They usually have to bring your bikes the day before. So people were showing up with their bikes and all their gear. And as always, it's a little bit of a cluster with pro athletes defending their space in the racks where they put their bike there. Then pro might think they need a little more space. They kind of push their stuff around. So it's kind of feeling feisty, kind of defending my position there. When I see an athlete that I've never seen before, it was number 20. That's all I remembered at the time. Number 20. It kind of burned in my memory because I see him go by with his helmet, and he's wearing an Ikoi CXR13 helmet. Which, for most people, okay, it's just an aero helmet, but, for a tri-geek like myself, someone that raced Ironman Tahoe a few weeks ago, I saw this helmet in the race, and I never had seen it before, so I was interested to learn more about it, so I actually was interested in maybe purchasing one, went online, I researched, I knew it was CPSC, it was not CPSC certified, which is actually required for athletes racing in the United States, except for Kona and Vegas. So I see this guy in the helmet, and I look over to Damon Barnett, who's a buddy of mine. And I say, Damo, should I tell this guy his helmet's not legal? And Damon responds back, well, is he fast? And just because if he's going to be kicking our butts, maybe I should tell him. And the last thing I thought of at that time was this guy's going to go on to win the race, run a 2:37, have an incredible day. So I didn't really, if I had known that, hindsight's 20/20, I probably would have gone up to this guy myself. But it was obvious this guy was a foreigner, and I don't speak Spanish, and I didn't want to go up to a guy I've never met before and say, hey buddy, your helmet's, I just didn't want to look like a jerk. So I go over to the two not officials, but they were WTC employees I know, Tom Ziebart, and the announcer Dave, who's the guy that's on the bullhorn all day long.
Let me interrupt you for a second because. For those who don't know Tom Ziebart, and I don't know him personally, but if you were to look at his LinkedIn profile, his official title comes up as senior operations manager of Ironman. So he's obviously somebody who's fairly high up within that company.
Yeah, he's very prominent. We see him at the pro meetings. He's a nice guy. He's an affable guy. He's got a good sense of humor. We like Tom Ziebart. So I found, he's a pretty approachable guy. So I brought up to him. I said, Tom, or Dave, I forget which one I brought up to first. I said, we have some friends from around the world that are at this race whose helmets are not CPSC certified. And, what should I do? And they kind of looked at each other, and they didn't really give me a particular direction. It was kind of like, well, if you feel, motivated, you can bring it up to somebody. And I'm bringing it up to you guys. Like, what should I do? And so what I did is I did something I shouldn't have. I went to a volunteer that was in the pro kind of corral, and I said, hey, look, number 20, I don't know this guy, but he's got a non-CPSC certified helmet. Can you bring something up to him? And I don't think, maybe he brought something up, maybe he didn't. But the moral of the story is I didn't tell a referee of the race. I told a WTC employee, prominent or not. Someone that's, obviously Tom and Dave, they're busy throughout the day, really busy. I mean, they have 3,500 athletes plus they're looking after, trying to run one of the biggest races in North America. But it is what it is. It was a rule that I brought up to these athletes. As the day progressed, I had kind of a crappy race, a pretty subpar race, but that's okay. It's end of the season race or whatever. But as I'm competing on the run, I see this guy, number 20, Del Corral. I see him working his way up the pro field. I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, this guy that just, is going to win this race. It looks like he's going to catch Starkowitz. Later did catch Starkowitz. This guy had a non-CPSC helmet. So what to do? Well, I wanted to make. It might sound really petty, but I actually yelled at my dad. I said, Dad, number 20, he was not wearing a CPSC helmet. He's going to get DQ'd. He's going to win the race. And my dad actually sent a tweet about it. My dad, who doesn't know how to use Twitter, but he actually sent that tweet before the race was over. And it's just kind of funny. I like to kind of kick up the wasp nest. I think you do, Andreas, as well, especially when we have rules like 5.9 that are kind of silly rules. They don't do a whole lot of good, but the rules are the rules. And I knew this was going to create a lot of just, people on Slow Twitch just go crazy. People on Twitter just go crazy, especially about stuff like this. So I thought, what the hell? I'm just going to tweet about this. And as soon as I finished the race, I tweeted, the guy that won wasn't wearing a CPSC helmet. Does anybody care? And some pros were like, dude, seriously, who cares? A lot of people said that. Some people said, holy crap, this could be a really big deal. And it sounds petty, and I understand why people might say, hey, it probably didn't have any bearing on the race. And maybe it did, maybe it didn't. It's proven fact that some CE helmets, like the Ikoi helmet, are 3 to 5 watts faster than some of the CPSC helmets. The CE helmets tend to be a little bit lighter. Talking to Andrew Starkowitz, they tend to be a little bit faster. But it is what it is. Maybe it wasn't a huge deal. But the reason it's important is because it's a rule, and the rule is black and white. And the rule says if you're not wearing that helmet, it's an automatic disqualification.
And it's a lot of the fact that he was a foreigner has come into play, and people are saying, well, maybe he didn't know, maybe something got lost in translation. The fact is that it's fairly clear in English that you must have a helmet that is CPSC certified to compete in the U.S. unless you're at the World Championships 70.3 or the World Championships in Kona. So that aspect of it is very clear. As a matter of fact, Thomas Gerlach actually posted a screen grab of what that letter or email looks like, and it couldn't be any more clear. So the failure was to inspect the helmets beforehand, at least part of it.
Well, I'm not the WTC, I'm not the USAT, but they beat it into your head at these pro meetings. They beat it into your head with all these emails. It's on there. You see it repeatedly. All the time you see this, that you have to have a CPSC helmet. So for me in the U.S., this was not Victor Del Corral's first time racing in the United States. So it's not his first time around the block. And like I said, the rule is like absolutely black and white. There's no room for interpretation. The interesting thing, the thing that adds kind of the dynamic here is that it wasn't caught, like you said, it wasn't caught before the race. It wasn't caught during the.
But it was. But in a sense, it was. And yes, you didn't tell an official that a official quote unquote that was wearing the striped shirt that this person had potentially what was an illegal helmet. But you did tell somebody, and Tom Ziebart, from his title, I would think that he's got some pull and he's got some ability to get in touch with the right person because he is fairly high up in the company. So just to switch things up a little bit, had that person been the CEO of Ironman and you would have told Andrew Messick, hey, listen, this person is not wearing a CPSC certified helmet, maybe we should do something about it, would he have been able to hide under the same technicality, or would we hold him up to a higher standard even though he's not technically a race official?
Yeah, I mean, I think, either way, whatever decision ultimately got made, and ultimately they decided not to disqualify Del Corral. I think the USAT or WTC, whether they like the rule or not, which it's pretty apparent that Jimmy Riccatello doesn't like this rule, because why would you like this rule? It makes things so complicated. It overcomplicates things. But it's their job to enforce the rules, and they decide not to DQ the guy. And for the WTC and I mean, this looks worse for the WTC than it does for USAT, because USAT is kind of behind the scenes, to be honest. So WTC, even if they don't like the rule, they're going to have egg on their face either way. Either they DQ the guy and they look just like Nazis, or they don't DQ the guy and they look really weak and indecisive. And it's kind of a lose-lose situation. The win here, the potential win here, is really this has generated a lot of attention, and that was kind of my goal with this. Is I want to generate a lot of attention, as much attention as I possibly can, about this rule, because people have been trying to change it for years. They haven't gotten any traction, and this has brought it into the light in terms of everyone from Europe that's racing, because this affects them if they want to race in the United States. They need to buy helmets. And this is sprung it into the limelight. I mean, everyone's gotten involved, from Dan Enfield on Slow Twitch to thousands of people that have watched the threads on Slow Twitch to Twitter, to a lot of people. So it's generated a lot of attention. But for me myself, I don't have any skin in the game here. If I move from 21st to 20th, who cares? Who cares? But the person that does have a lot of skin in the game is Andrew Starkowitz, the first American man to go under 8 hours. He does not want to win on a technicality. But the important thing for Starkowitz is in 2013 he qualified to Kona by 45 points. By the skin of his teeth, he made it to Kona. He goes to Kona. He's one of the most exciting U.S. athletes to compete there. He's a superstar cyclist. World record holder. For the bike split, the fastest American that's ever raced an Ironman. And this guy had lost more points between first and second at Florida than he ever, would have qualified to Kona with. So, for him it matters a great deal. I don't think it's the money that Starkowitz is concerned about, but he cares about the Kona points, because ultimately this could require him to race another Ironman or 70.3 in 2014 before Kona. So, that makes a huge difference in how well rested you are in your season and your preparation. Had he had 2,000 points, he needs to do that basically twice to qualify for Kona, and now he's going to have to do it more than twice if he wants to qualify for Kona. So, for him, he's got a lot of skin in the game, and like I said, if the guy doesn't DQ himself, or if he's not DQ'd, then Starkowitz does have some options left. He can appeal to USAT, the governing body, and file a protest. But what's interesting, Andreas, is that this is a very unique situation. No one has ever filed a non-call protest to the USAT. So what that means is no penalty was called during the race. Nobody cut the course or deliberately cheated, and nothing happened during the race. This is all ex post facto, and someone's bringing it to the USAT, paying a filing fee to file a protest, because it's not free. You actually have to pay for it to be taken to the board, to Charlie Crawford and his team. And this is actually unprecedented. So why this matters? People are like, why does it matter? Why does it matter? It's no big deal. It actually does matter. This has never happened before. It's a rule that has huge implications that could be turned on its head, and this is a time to try to push that. So yeah, it matters a great deal, which is why we're talking about this.
No, and I don't disagree. I mean, from Starkowicz's standpoint, I see two potential problems. You mentioned the points, which between first and second point at Florida cost them 400 points. I think the prize money, certainly that's important. But I think the fact that he might have to race an extra race throughout the year, obviously, is a big factor. But from another perspective is, here's somebody who could potentially benefit from using equipment that's not CPSC certified, but he, as well as I don't know, 74 out of the 76 other folks in the men's field decided to follow the rules because that's really what the rules say, and that's what you get hammered at every pro meeting, and that's what they tell you that you need to do. So when a rule like this is not properly enforced, in a sense, it says, it's a little bit of a slap in the face to those who do choose to follow the rules, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's other rules that are similar in respect to this. It's basically like, like for instance in swimming, you can't use a wetsuit that's 5 millimeters. I'm sorry, more than 5 millimeters. So for instance, the DeSoto Water Rover suit that's a centimeter thick, technically you're not allowed to use that suit. If the guy at Florida was wearing this suit and it wasn't discovered until afterwards, would the same thing happen? Probably people would raise a storm about it. And same thing with swim skins. Certain swim skins are banned. But it's really kind of hard to enforce. Are the referees supposed to go through and measure wetsuits and check helmets at every single race? Are they supposed to check how far your saddle is ahead of the bottom bracket or behind the bottom bracket? There's a lot of rules as far as the USAT goes. So it's kind of like what's reasonably can be enforced, and I think there could be some improvement. But the fact is that there are rules on the books. And some of the rules are black and white, where a DQ is, required. But what happens after a race is finished? Ultimately, it's not going to be my job. If I bring it up, great. But if I was Starkowitz, I'd be mad as hell. And
let me ask you, because you know more about this than I do, is part of the reason that was given that the victory was upheld was that no formal protest was raised. Now, what constitutes a formal protest?
It's a good question. I'm not sure how much I can really talk about it. Jordan Rapp, he's one of the, I guess, the athlete ambassador for PROTA, which is the professional triathlete, kind of not quite a union, but it's kind of an association of pros, or it's not really even like a lobbying body or anything. It's just kind of this weak organization. But Jordan, got involved with this, and basically Jordan asked, do you want to file a protest? And initially, Starkowitz and myself, who are kind of tied into this thing, were basically like, this isn't our decision. This is, the WTC needs to make that decision. I can't, file a protest and DQ this guy. It's not my responsibility. And then, so if we kick it back to the referees to make the decision, and they don't make the the DQ, for Starkowitz, for instance, he wants to fight this thing. And I would file had I known the decision in retrospect, I would have protested it. Just on the fact that it's a blatant black and white violation. People say, oh, you're being a jerk about it. It's like, the rules are the rules. I don't care if you're in Formula One or if you're in golf. I mean, there's rules. You follow the rules. It's like a gentleman's code. And if you break the rules, even if it's unintentional, if you're in golf and you step up to your ball on the putting green and the ball moves, you penalize yourself. If nobody sees it, you penalize yourself, because there's accountability and respect, and it's a code. And whether this guy realizes it or not, I mean, it's just kind of silly. If you break the rules and it's proven afterwards, I think this guy could have actually, had he stepped forward, imagine if this guy would have DQ'd himself and said, hey, look, they're right. I used a helmet that wasn't legal. I'm going to DQ myself. I mean, that would have been a huge amount of goodwill. He would have lost $5,000 in his Kona points, but that would have been an interesting situation. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, I absolutely, and I in a sport unlike golf, where in golf you're not always trying to look for every little advantage like you are in cycling and triathlon. I think it'd be highly unlikely for somebody to penalize him or herself.
No, it happens all the time where athletes, draw a penalty on themselves. If you move your ball, a lot of times you're the only person that sees it. And
Oh
it
no,
happens.
in golf, in golf I know all about it, and there's been some very notable DQs, self-imposed DQs as a result. But I think in the sport of triathlon, where every little watt counts, you're going to try to push the envelope as much as you can. And I'm not saying that people are cheaters. But you're going to try to get away with as much as you can without getting caught, and I think this may have been one of those instances where he gambled and it paid off. And I think the question for me, though, going back to the formal protest, is by two athletes going to the officials and saying, "We want you to make the right decision." I mean, that to me sounds like, listen, you obviously haven't made a good decision, so why don't you reconsider? It sounds like they didn't give you a formal process to follow if you did want to file that protest. So
well, according to the USAT, you have actually 60 minutes following the end of the race to file a protest. So, according to the technical rules, as far as USAT goes, you have about 60 minutes, and by that point, I didn't file a protest within the 60 minutes. I didn't even know that was actually was part of the guidelines, but it is. And so if that's the case, then you can't file a protest with the refs at the race. But what you can do is you can file a protest with the board of USAT up to 30 days after the race, and that's probably what's going to happen.
So where do we go from here? I mean, the question is, I think this is one of those key moments where the rule is probably going to have to be changed, or there has to be some sort of exception granted for foreign players, or not players, but foreign racers to compete in the U.S. and not have to buy a new helmet. But where do you think we go from here?
Yeah, so like I said, I think a lot of people within the WTC, to their credit, don't enjoy this rule. It's not something that they enjoy trying to enforce. So I think there is some kind of governing body kind of commingling where the WTC and the USAT meet, and I think that's going to happen in the next few weeks here. And I'd expect that the rule's going to get changed or amended going into the 2014 season. I hope that's the case, and I hope if that's not the case, I hope the WTC puts forth some kind of standard going forward. They've kind of set a precedent here that, hey, look, after the race is over with, if a rule's not enforced, if a protest isn't filed, we're not going to DQ anybody. There's clearly a precedent that's set there. But I really hope they use this momentum and all the kind of furor that it's caused to kind of convince USAT, hey, let's follow rules like Australia, where you have to have, if you're just riding around the streets in Australia, you need to have a certified helmet. But if you're in a race, hey, you gotta wear a helmet. Basically, that's about all I think all it says in Australia. So it sounds a little bit more fair. It's open to international athletes and doesn't put any restrictions, because the WTC doesn't want to risk their huge pool. I think there were like 1,500 or more athletes from overseas that were racing Ironman Florida. So they don't want to jeopardize that goodwill with their international contingent. So I kind of understand, their motivations. Maybe their motivation was, hey, let's just try to bury this thing and not DQ this guy because we don't want to wreck our goodwill with these international athletes. Why put our revenue at stake? So, was that a bearing on the decision? Hell, I don't know, but it might be something I'm concerned about if that's how I generate half my money is through international athletes. So, there's a lot of dynamics. It's an interesting issue, but people that initially said, hey, who cares? I think they were wrong because a lot of people care, and it's an interesting debate. So. I think the debate, is going to be continuing for a little while, and hopefully they change this rule.
Well, and the bigger question that I have is, what if Starkowicz does decide to protest the no-call protest, or whatever the technical name for it was that you were mentioning earlier, and the call does get overturned? I mean, WTC has already looked bad. How much worse are they going to look if that's the case?
That's the thing, man, is that this is kind of a black hole that kind of it might seem kind of petty and trivial, but this kind of pulls in so many issues. Do you enforce black and white decisions? It's a very interesting conversation, and they got to make it's like a moral kind of debate. Do the rules matter? Do you follow the rules? Whether they're stupid or not. I mean, as a governing body, I think they need to, like you and I were talking offline about this, that you can always hide behind the rules. You can be the bad guy, and always kind of keep that moral high ground of just I was thinking about this the day of the race, and you're watching this guy cross the finish line and all the emotion that goes into winning an Ironman race like this and running a 2:37 marathon. If that was taken away, imagine how you'd feel after destroying your body with a performance like that. But at the end of the day, are the rules the rules? I think that's for our viewers to decide. So I think we can move on to the next subject because I think we've beaten this thing to death. It's going to continue to get beaten to death. And
well, I do have one more thing to say. And I'm trying not to get on camera too much because, as people can see, I've got a little bit of a Movember mustache going, and it creeps me out a little bit. But I'm trying not to get in front of it as much as possible. But we've heard black and white thrown around a lot. It's black and white. It's black and white. For a rule that's so black and white, that's being so interpreted in so many different ways. It's silly that we can kind of say, well, he didn't get an advantage, it wasn't properly protested, blah blah blah, this, that, the other. I mean, it's black and white. However, from WTC, they're more than willing to very black and white distinguish who's a referee and who's not, and who you can bring this up to. I mean, there seems to be double standards everywhere you look, and it kind of bugs me. So just to leave it at, I hope Andrew Starkowicz does protest it and does go to the USAT, and I hope it does get overturned.
Me too, and yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's a definitely interesting situation, and we'll see where it goes. All I can do is kind of laugh at the situation now.
Well, I'll try not to bum you out anymore. I mean, should we talk a little bit about happy stuff, like people going fast? I mean, we had a 2:37 marathon and a 4:02 bike split. That's pretty incredible, huh?
Yeah, I kind of joked on Slow Twitch. I could have had a jet ski on the swim. I could have had a motorcycle on the bike, and I could have, had a pogo stick on the run. And I was going to get my ass thoroughly handed to me either way. These guys rode incredible times, and people were saying, "Oh, it's a fast course." It was windy all day long. There was a headwind on the way out on the bike. It kind of turned into a crosswind all day long, and then had a kind of a cross tailwind on the way back. So it was a fast day. Yvonne Van Vlorken went 8:47. She broke the course record by many, many minutes. She's now ranked number 2 in the world with that performance. Absolutely incredible. But yeah, you got to give it to Starkowitz. A 4:02 is absolutely sick. To start the run with a 16, 17-minute lead. Who thought that someone was going to run a 2:37 to be able to run this guy down? I don't think anybody thought of it. Starkowitz is actually running pretty fast. If you look at his first half, I think he went through in like 2:52 pace for the first half, and kind of slowed over the last couple miles. I think he maybe wilted in the heat and was a little bit cooked from that bike. And Del Corral got the better of him. So definitely an interesting race, dynamic-wise, and was fascinating for me as an athlete. The Prince of Bahrain was in the race. Actually, wasn't that slow. I was on the second loop when I motorcade actually on the run course with him. It was like kind of mind-boggling that this guy has an escort. But maybe I understand the security risk, but the fact that this guy, athletes can't wear headphones in a race, but this dude can have his own freaking Escalade or Ford Excursion SUV behind him. So that was kind of mind-boggling to me.
I think that might be another topic for another time because a lot of people have been commenting on that. But it definitely is too bad that these two performances get overshadowed by what happened. I mean, I certainly can't imagine how fast you've got to go to be able to bike a 4:02. I mean, you're a pretty decent cyclist, and I mean, I think you were at least 20 minutes behind that, right?
Yeah, I was just so humiliated. I didn't even look to see how fast I rode. It was over 25 miles an hour, but it sure as hell wasn't 27.74 miles an hour. But just to go back to the Prince of Bahrain real quick, I have to make a comment. For a guy that's probably worth a couple $1 billion and flew to a race in his own every loop when I went by him, I was encouraging the guy, and it was nice to see like he was responding to it. Some people kind of have like a prickly demeanor, and this guy seemed to be having a good time. In a region of the world that is very wealthy and slowly getting more and more obese. Obesity is a huge problem in the Middle East. To see a guy that has the potential to maybe bring sedentary people into a more active lifestyle and to use his wealth for good, maybe even bring a race to Bahrain in the future. That's interesting to see. So this sport needs to grow around the world, and I don't care if the guy has his own 747 on the run course following him. It's pretty awesome that the guy's doing it. And I didn't have a problem with it. Didn't interfere with the race one iota, and I think it's pretty awesome.
What about how do you feel about the torture allegations? Not to get too political on the show, but how does that play a factor into how you feel about allowing people like that to participate?
Yeah, I don't know anything about that situation, so I think people need to read into it and make their own. There's allegations of all sorts of crap that goes on around the world, and some people have a vested interest, and I don't know what's out there, to be honest, so I can't make a call.
Now, actually, I thought that the response from WTC was appropriate, and like you said, that those are allegations, and again, I don't know exactly the details of it, but definitely it ended up bringing a lot more into the conversation than just the motorcade and that aspect of it. So, and unlike what they seem to believe, I don't think the World Championships is moving to Bahrain anytime soon.
Right on. So you got anything else in the bag of discussion points? What else do you want to talk about?
I think you wanted to touch on this weekend's race a little bit, but I don't know how much you want to discuss on that. But we've got a few minutes, I believe.
So if Andrew Starkowitz, if you were to take him out of the equation, the next best kind of most prominent cyclist in the U.S. world as far as triathlon goes, the next best cyclist is probably Cameron Dye. He's a very dynamic athlete, great swim biker. Weakness is a little bit on the run. And actually, we're going to see Starkowitz and Cameron Dye collide this weekend at Rev 3. Starkowitz is looking to wrap up his season. He's just in Ironman last weekend, so we'll see what he has left in the tank. But it'll be interesting to see how they duke it out on the bike and how Cameron Dye does at his debut half Ironman. This is kind of an athlete that could really excel at that distance in non-draft legal, and I think it's going to be really interesting to watch Cameron Dye and Starkowitz duel it out.
And Cameron Dye, I mean, he seems to, like you said, I mean, he's one of those American guys that's very dynamic. But is he getting to the point where there's not much of a future for him racing the Olympic circuit, and he's making this move, or I mean, what's the reason behind it? You think?
Well, I think that's kind of a natural progression. To move up to longer distance, that's obvious. But also, I don't think he's really risking too much at the end of the season. And maybe it's a good workout for him. And maybe he realizes, hey, this is what I should have done all along. So maybe he's just testing out the waters, seeing if this is for him, seeing if he can handle the distance. Kind of like Matt Charbot is racing Ironman Arizona. He's stepping up. He's kind of skipping the halves, even though he has raced, I think, one now or two. And he's going straight to Ironman Arizona. So, it's going to be interesting to see how he does. And I enjoy these guys stepping up to the longer distances. Maybe they think it can be more lucrative. Maybe they're just trying to spread their talents around and see what they can do. And it'll be interesting to see these guys racing.
So I can't promise that we won't be talking about the helmet issue next week. It'll be interesting to see what happens from now till then. But certainly Ironman Arizona is coming up, and we'll definitely be talking about that. And again, Starkowicz's performance over the weekend and seeing how he does against Cameron Dye.
Yeah, certainly. I'm kind of over the whole helmet issue, but Victor Del Corral has actually signed up for Ironman Arizona, and you, as the former manager of Tribe Multisport in Scottsdale, you and I both were kind of copied on a message that Victor Del Corral was actually seen in Tribe yesterday buying a new Aero helmet or ordering a new LG Vortiz. So that was just too funny for me to see.
Well, at least he's. We know we're not going to run into the same issue next weekend, so that's good. Because to be honest with you, I think once is enough.
I think so, and I think that with regard to that mustache, I think you could say the same. I think I've seen that mustache before. I don't need to see it again, man. Shave that thing.
We've got what is it, the 7th? So we've got what 30 or 23 days or so left of it. So it'll get a lot more bushy, and you'll get to see plenty of it. Don't worry.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
All right, Kevin. Well, for anybody who wants to follow us between now and next Thursday, you can follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/thisweekintriathlon, and you can also check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/thisweekintri. Thanks, Kevin. Lots of great insight, and I like your eyebrows.
I was trying to make a mustache, but I failed, so I'm going to...
Well, we'll see everybody next week.
I'll talk to you next week.
All right, take care.